Hi, I'm Arden. My baby died, and my stepfather, the CEO of the company I helped build, told me to choose work or the child you lost. He gave me 2 days to grieve a lifetime, so I walked out without a word. What he didn't know was that same night, I moved $9.5 million into an offshore account, a place he, HR, and legal could never reach. It wasn't revenge at first, but when family turns your grief into a power play, what choice do they leave you but war? I was staring at the floor when the call came in. Just outside the boardroom, in the hallway that always smelled like burnt coffee and dry carpet, my phone vibrated in my palm like it had something urgent to whisper. I didn't even need to check the screen. I already knew. My son, my firstborn, wasn't going to make it. The NICU nurse's voice cracked before she even said the words. I stood there frozen, barely hearing the rest. Something about complications. Something about they tried. You walk now, you don't just drop the ball, you kill the whole project. I didn't say anything. I was still standing. That surprised me. He went on. We've all lost things. Children, parents, dogs. You think you're the first? I clenched my fists in my pockets. Sterling exhaled like I was the disappointment. Here's your choice. Stay and do your job, or walk away and go cry about a kid who's not coming back. But you can't have both. Choose, work, or the child you lost. Something snapped in me, quietly. There was no shouting, no broken glass, no drama. Just a sudden, sharp clarity, like cold air hitting your lungs after being underwater too long. I looked around his office. The art on the wall cost more than my entire apartment. The leather chair, the gold-plated name plaque, the unopened bottle of Macallan he kept on the side shelf for deals that mattered. Everything in that room screamed power and legacy. And yet here he was, small. A man who thought control was the same as respect. I see, I said quietly. I nodded once, like I was the one being unreasonable. Understood. He was already turning back to his screen. Glad we're on the same page. But we weren't. I walked out of his office, back down that sterile hallway, past the HR corner where fake plants gathered dust and no one ever made eye contact. My chest was burning. Not with grief, but with something heavier, something sharper. I thought about every late night I stayed behind to clean up his mess, every pitch I delivered while he took the credit, every birthday, anniversary, hospital scare I'd missed because the team needs you, Arden. I was the youngest, the forgotten one, the stepson that never quite made it into the family portrait. I worked twice as hard to be seen, and in that moment, I realized I had made myself invisible through obedience. I stepped into the elevator, hit the button to the lobby, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Same tired eyes, same pressed shirt, but something had changed. I wasn't going to beg. Not anymore. Outside, the cold hit like a slap. Snow hadn't started yet, but the sky warned it was coming. I zipped my coat halfway, walked past the coffee cart Sterling banned from parking out front, and kept moving. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew what I was going to do. And I whispered it, not like a threat, but like a promise. You'll regret this. I didn't take the train home that night. I walked from Midtown to Queens in the dead of winter, past the freezing bus stops and neon bodega signs, through the kind of cold that strips the noise from the city. My ears were burning, my fingers numb, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. By the time I reached my building, my legs felt like steel rods, moving on muscle memory. I didn't stop to check the mail, didn't look at the elevator mirror. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and locked it again behind me. Top bolt, bottom bolt, chain. The apartment was dark, except for the hallway light I always left on for my son, a habit I hadn't broken. I didn't turn it off. In the kitchen, I poured a glass of water and left it untouched. I stood there for a few minutes, leaning against the counter, watching my own breath in the air. Then I moved into the living room, sat down at my desk, and opened the laptop. The screen lit up the room in soft blue. The clock in the corner read 2:03 a.m. I wasn't shaking anymore. I didn't type anything right away. I just stared at the screensaver. A photo of my son's ultrasound, pixelated from years of transferring between phones and devices. I whispered out loud, like I owed him the truth. Tonight, you'll see me stand up. I opened the root directory. Buried beneath folders named after mundane things, quarterly reports, meeting notes, asset roadmaps, was a hidden architecture no one knew about, not even IT, because I built it line by line, over 4 years. While Sterling bragged at conferences about proprietary encryption and airtight chain of custody systems, I was the one who made them work. He never understood the spine of his own company, but I did. I was the spine. One by one, I accessed the access points. Multi-authentication windows blinked open like old ghosts. Sterling's financial flagship, the $9.5 million fund earmarked for the international crypto banking arm, was exactly where I expected. We'd designed the project to be decentralized, globally mirrored, untouchable from a single node. But there was one back door, mine. Not even the board knew it existed. Click, log in, click, enter private key, click, confirm biometric bypass, click, begin transfer. The first $1.2 million moved to a secured offshore account I'd opened 2 years ago. Not in my name, not in anyone's. It was routed through Estonia, reflagged in Panama, and quarantined in a digital blind spot. No breadcrumbs, no fingerprints. I didn't pause. Second transfer, $2.3 million, triggered a fail-safe that wiped my trace off the main company log. Third batch, $4 million, split into nested accounts, all labeled with Sterling's own approval codes. The final amount, the remainder, I didn't move right away. Instead, I created a new file on the shared drive, the one Sterling could still access, the one he always checked first thing every morning. The file's name was simple: removed by original author. Inside was a single line of text: control is an illusion when you never understood the system. I saved it, closed the folder, and encrypted it with the same keys Sterling used for board communication. Just enough to make him think the board had gotten involved. And then I erased his access. Completely. No reset. No appeal. No admin override. His digital fingerprint was gone. I sat back in my chair and let out a slow breath. My hands were steady now, not from confidence, from necessity. Some people scream. Some people throw things. Some people punch walls. Me? I take apart the machine that made me small, one line of code at a time. I thought about the funeral I wouldn't be at, about the tiny white casket I'd never carry, about how Sterling had reduced my fatherhood to an inconvenience. My child will never see me break, I said out loud. I looked around the room. Nothing had changed. The fridge still hummed, the hallway light still flickered. The city was still sleeping, but I was awake, and I wasn't scared. At 5:41 a.m., just as the sky began to shift from black to steel gray, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I didn't need to see. Voicemail. Then another. And another. I didn't listen. I turned the phone face down on the desk, closed the laptop, and leaned back in the chair. The silence was heavy, but this time, it was mine. The first voicemail came before sunrise, his voice already cracking. I was already halfway across the bridge by then. Manhattan behind me, fading into a soft gray under the morning frost. I hadn't slept, not really. Just watched the screen go black after I shut the laptop and sat in that silence until it felt like part of me. The phone lay face up on the passenger seat, buzzing again. I didn't need to look. Same number, same man, different tone, probably. The first one had come at 5:12 a.m. I didn't listen right away, just watched the seconds tick by on the lock screen. But eventually, curiosity chipped away at the numbness. Report to my office immediately. This is unacceptable, Arden. Cold, corporate, as if nothing had happened. No death, no bloodline buried, no betrayal from a man who was supposed to protect me. I didn't respond. The second voicemail landed 20 minutes later. I was past Newark by then, the hum of the road masking the vibrating tone of panic that laced his voice. Do you understand what you've done? Oh, I did. Intimately, I had lived and breathed that project for 2 years. Every line of code, every encrypted line of access, every trigger condition. I didn't need their systems to track the funds. I had built their systems. The third voicemail hit differently. I was pulling off into a rest stop just outside Edison. I let the car idle and pressed play. "Son, we need you back here. Please, just let's talk." And there it was. The one word that hadn't been used in years. Son. Not when I graduated top of my class. Not when I signed on to rebuild the company's infrastructure. Not even when my baby was born. Now that his empire was wobbling, it showed up. Like a hand-me-down coat pulled out of the attic. Dusty, misused, out of season. The engine clicked as I shut it off. I sat still for a long time, staring out at the empty diner just beyond the lot. The neon open sign blinked tiredly against the glass. I took the phone and played the voicemails again, this time with a kind of surgical attention. In Sterling's voice, I could trace the unraveling, from command to confusion to pleading, all within 90 minutes. That's when it hit me. He was never the structure. I was, quietly, invisibly, consistently. All those years I thought I was just filling gaps, being useful. Turns out I was the only damn thing holding the place together. I looked down at my hands. They didn't shake. Not like they used to in high-stakes meetings or long nights full of deadline panic. They were still, calm, like they finally knew what they were for. I stepped out of the car, grabbed a seat at the window booth inside the diner, and ordered a black coffee from a waitress who looked like she'd seen 100 quiet mornings just like this one. She didn't ask questions, just poured and walked away. I opened the laptop again. The same one from last night. Same machine that carried my backup keys, protocols, firewalls, kill switches. It hummed to life like it was part of my pulse. I drafted one email. Just a subject line. Terms. I didn't write the body. Didn't need to. The message was in the silence I had finally weaponized. Sterling was used to people shouting back or folding. He didn't know what to do with stillness. But now, it was the loudest thing in the room. I stared at the blinking cursor for a minute longer. Then I shut the laptop, finished my coffee in 2 slow sips, and stepped back out into the morning. The frost had melted, but the chill was still in my bones. I didn't send the email. Not yet. After I typed terms in the subject line, I just stared at it. The little blinking cursor was the only thing moving in that entire booth. My plate of eggs sat mostly untouched, congealing in the chill air of the diner. Outside, snow began to drift lazily down, covering the sidewalks in a quiet white sheet. The hum of the heater above mixed with the low clatter of plates and distant conversation. But none of it touched me. I was somewhere else, somewhere halfway between grief and something colder. He told me to choose. That morning in his office, standing there like a god behind his glass desk, pretending he didn't just gut me, he said it like a dare, work or your child, as if love was an inconvenience, as if loss had an expiration date. I looked at that word again. Terms. And then I closed the lid, again, not out of doubt, just pacing myself. I glanced around. Only 2 other tables were occupied. One by a couple in their 60s reading the paper and passing jelly packets back and forth like they'd done it every morning for 30 years. The other by a man in a trucker cap, sipping his 4th refill while scrolling his phone. Then there was the waitress, maybe in her 40s, maybe younger, hard to tell. She had that look people wear when life's knocked them around, but they still managed to keep their chin up. She caught my eye as she passed and nodded toward my untouched plate. "Need me to heat that up?" she asked. I shook my head. "No thanks." She paused. "You okay, hun? You look like you're thinking too loud." I cracked the faintest smile. "You could say that." She poured me more coffee. "Sometimes silence is the loudest answer," she said casually, then walked off like it was nothing. But that line landed like a punch. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer. I opened the laptop again. It didn't need to be an essay, no justification, no explanation. Just clarity, $300 per hour, minimum 20 hours per week, paid weekly in advance, remote only, no weekend communication, all decisions final, no negotiation. It felt absurd as I wrote it. Not because I didn't believe I was worth it. I did. But because just 24 hours ago, I wouldn't have dared ask for it. That's how small I'd let them make me. But that Arden, the one who swallowed his voice every time Sterling called him kid in front of the board, That guy died when my baby did. This version, he wasn't asking. He was setting the price of betrayal. Still, I hesitated, not out of weakness, but because somewhere in my chest, the ache still lived. That tiny face, that still room, the weight of a life that would never grow up to know me. I wondered what he'd think of this, of me. Would he be proud, ashamed, confused? I shook the thought loose. That wasn't the deal. Sterling had made this a transaction. I was just negotiating the rate. I scrolled to the top of the message. No, dear Sterling. No signature, just the subject line. Terms. I hovered over send, and right then, like on cue, my phone buzzed again. His name flashed across the screen. I didn't answer, just stared at it. He was still calling, still hoping the old Arden would pick up, the one who wanted approval, who needed to be told he mattered. That Arden was gone. I turned back to the laptop. Hit send. Simple as that. The message left the outbox. The cursor stopped blinking, and I sat back, letting the moment settle. It was the first move in a game I hadn't agreed to play, but now I was in it, and I'd play by my rules. The phone lit up again. This time I picked up. I didn't even let his voice finish cracking. As soon as I heard him begin to stammer something about bringing things back under control, I leaned back in my chair, stared at the dull ceiling above my kitchen table, and hung up. The silence afterward felt louder than anything he could have said. It was just after 7 p.m. The city outside my apartment window was already wrapped in a wet, gray hush. Snow hadn't stuck yet, just slushed into the gutters. My kitchen still smelled faintly like the lavender cleaner I used earlier, but even that couldn't soften the weight in the room. This table, this very table, used to be where we planned colors for the nursery. Soft greens, a mobile shaped like clouds, a tiny elephant print from Etsy. I could still hear her laugh as we argued about names. I never got to hold my son. Now, in the same seat where I once looked up bassinets, I opened my laptop to draft a new kind of future. Not one filled with lullabies, but with terms. Sharp, simple, brutal terms. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could still feel Sterling's voice on the other end of that call, not just desperate, unfamiliar. Like a man who'd watched the ground open beneath his feet and wasn't sure which way was up anymore. He tried every angle in 2 minutes flat. "We'll pay whatever it takes," he'd said. "Just fix this. It's spiraling." That was the word he used, spiraling, as if the collapse was some passive, natural phenomenon, not something built on years of exploitation, lies, and fear, not something he engineered. I typed slowly. $300 per hour, 20-hour minimum. Payment up front. I choose the timeline. I choose the project scope. No calls outside of work hours. No physical meetings. No attempts at ownership claims. This agreement exists until I say it doesn't. Then I leaned back again and read it out loud, just to hear it. Hear the version of myself who wasn't waiting anymore. 10 minutes later, Sterling called again. I let it ring twice and then picked up. "Arden," he began. I didn't answer. "I know emotions are high right now," he said, like this was a breakup. "Skip the therapy talk," I said. "You've got the email." There was a pause. He must have read it. I imagined him standing behind that giant desk, hands clenched, lips curled, surrounded by people who were finally starting to see how shaky his throne really was. "This isn't a negotiation," he said. "It never was," I replied. $300 an hour. Come on, that's extortion." "No," I said, voice steady. "That's survival. You denied me 2 days to bury my child. Now you'll pay for every minute you took." Another pause. Then came the chorus. The legal team. I heard Sandra from HR chime in, trying to sound professional. "Mr. Hayes, any code or architecture you've written during your time with us is company intellectual property." I laughed, quiet, but not kindly. "Do you want the list of tools I built at home unpaid after midnight because Sterling wanted a demo at 7 a.m. the next day?" I asked. "Or maybe the ones I fixed while your team was on vacation?" A man's voice jumped in. Someone from legal, probably one of the younger ones who thought his JD meant something to me. That still doesn't change. You know what changes it? I said, cutting him off. The fact that I was the only one who knew how it all worked. You called me, not the team. That's not loyalty, that's dependence. Sterling tried one last time, and not an argument, more like a plea disguised as indignation. You'd really make us pay like this? I looked at the baby monitor still sitting at the edge of the counter. It hadn't been touched in weeks. I would have traded every dollar I have to bring him home, I said, but you made me choose, so now I'm choosing again, and it's not you. Then I hung up. 3 seconds later, my phone lit up again. But it wasn't Sterling this time, it was his personal lawyer, and I was still holding the phone when the second call came in. This time from a different number. No contacts saved. Just digits. And a text, short and sharp. Check your email. You'll want to see this. I didn't move right away. Letting the phone rest face down again on the table, I stared at the empty mug in front of me, the one I'd been sipping from while on the call with Sterling. Same table where we once laid out baby names, printed nursery plans, argued about crib colors. Now it was a war table. By the time I opened my laptop, my inbox had already refreshed. Subject line, immediate video conference request. 9:30 a.m. EST. From legal, CC'd, HR, Sterling, a partner from the firm's board, and me. No explanation, just a link and one sentence. Attendance is mandatory. I didn't respond. I just showered, dressed, and brewed another pot of coffee. The clock said 9:27 when I clicked the link. The screen came alive with flickers of movement, suits in muted grays and blues, expensive-looking bookshelves behind them. Sterling sat at the center, jaw clenched, eyes bloodshot. His lawyer was to his left, a woman I vaguely remembered from last year's board retreat. HR had her usual professional grimace on. Legal looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. And me? I was still in my kitchen. Hoodie, mug in hand, window cracked open to let in the sounds of the city. Sterling's lawyer spoke first. "Mr. Cross," she began, her voice carefully void of inflection, "we are convening today in light of certain actions taken by you that constitute, in our estimation, misappropriation of company property and potential theft." I sipped my coffee. "We have evidence," she continued, "that you've removed proprietary infrastructure, including source code, security protocols, and internal financial tracking software from company servers. As you know, these systems were developed during your tenure with Sterling Equinox and developed by me," I cut in, still calm, "mostly off the clock, usually on weekends, often without a line item on payroll." Her lips twitched, but she didn't blink. Sterling leaned in. "This isn't a debate, Arden. You've crossed a line. What you did last night—" "You mean the systems you begged me to restore 5 hours ago?" I asked. He flinched, just enough that the others noticed. "You sent me an email, called, offered whatever I wanted. Now you're calling it theft?" Sterling's tone grew sharper. "I was trying to salvage the business before the board finds out your visionary tech stack doesn't exist without the guy you called disposable," HR finally chimed in, as if reading from a script. "Arden, we need to inform you that further refusal to cooperate could result in blacklisting within partner networks. Firms talk." I smiled, not wide, just enough. "That's cute," I said. "You think I care about your little blacklist? I've already got 3 firms reaching out. Turns out, when you build invisible backbones, people notice when they disappear." Legal cleared his throat. "Regardless, we are formally requesting that you return all assets belonging to Sterling Equinox immediately." Sterling's jaw tightened. Then he said it. The thing he shouldn't have said. "We can't finish the $9.5 million migration without your files." The room went still. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make sure every pixel caught that line. I wanted it recorded. Then I leaned forward and said, "Thank you. That will be very helpful if this goes to court." Sterling's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. HR reached for a notepad. Legal looked down. I took another slow sip of coffee. "You said I had to choose." "I did. Now you want the work back without the worker." Doesn't work like that, Sterling barked. You'll regret this, Arden. But I didn't flinch. Regret? I repeated. I already buried my child. There's nothing left you can take. HR tried to regain control. We're prepared to offer a settlement if you return the source files and confirm deletion of all local backups. I leaned back. No. My terms were clear. $300 per hour, 20-hour minimum. Paid in full before I lift a finger. That's survival. That's the cost of betrayal. Sterling's lawyer muttered something to legal. He nodded. Then I delivered the final blow. If you believe this is theft, I said slowly, file it, in court. But remember, discovery works both ways. That landed like a brick. Discovery meant digging into emails, private chats, confidential records, all those strategic decisions Sterling made that weren't exactly board approved. They'd be on the table. Nobody said anything for a few seconds. Even the background buzz from Sterling's office air system sounded louder now. He tried one last time, softer this time. Arden, don't do this. But I already had. Without another word, I clicked leave meeting. Back in my apartment, the hum of the fridge was the only sound. I stood there, hands still resting on the keyboard, breathing slow. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel scared either. I felt done. Then my phone buzzed, a message from a number I didn't recognize. Check your email. You'll want to see this. I didn't rush to check the email. The message sat there on my phone, glowing in the dim light of my apartment. Rain had started, just a whisper against the window pane, almost like a second thought. I stared at the ceiling for a moment, then pushed my chair back from the table and walked over to the sink. Rinsed out my coffee mug, dried it with the same towel we used to wrap around the baby's bottles. Some habits die slowly. When I sat back down and opened the laptop, my heart was already ahead of me. Pacing, waiting. The email was simple. No signature, no flair. Subject, insurance. Body, just listen. There was one attachment, an audio file. MP4, no explanation. I hesitated for half a second before hitting play. The voice that came through was unmistakable. Sterling. Of course, we inflated it. That's how you win bids. You pad the hours, bury the real cost in consulting overhead, and call it innovation. A few muffled laughs followed. Then another voice, one I recognized from the boardroom, Jensen, the CFO. You really think they're going to ask questions when they see the numbers? Arden's back end makes it all look clean. Sterling again. Exactly, he's the ghost in the machine. He built it all. We just dress it up. More laughter, then the kicker. If anything goes south, we blame him. He's technical. The board doesn't understand what he does. He's the perfect firewall. I paused the recording. My stomach twisted, not in surprise, in confirmation. This wasn't about one man's ego anymore. It was systematic, engineered. I'd spent the last few years building quiet systems in the shadows, thinking I was helping something good grow. All I'd done was build the scaffolding for a lie. I clicked play again. And if he ever pushes back, Sterling continued, we remind him what happened, what he lost. The recording ended there. My hands curled into fists before I even realized. The baby's urn sat on the shelf above the kitchen counter, right where I could see it. I got up, walked over, and stood there for a moment. You weren't leverage, I whispered. You were never leverage. The last time I stood still like that, it was in the funeral home. The guy at the desk had called me sir 3 times before I could answer him. All I could think about then was how quiet grief was, how no one really prepares you for the sound of nothing. And now, here was Sterling, laughing in that recording, bragging, using that same silence like a tool. Something changed in me right then. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was correction. This was the beginning of an end. I sat back down, opened an encrypted drive, dragged the audio file into the folder I'd labeled continuity. My insurance folder. Proof, not for leverage, for justice. I backed it up to a second drive, then a third, each one with multi-layer encryption, each one under a different name. I've always believed in quiet systems, in things that work while no one watches. But this was going to be loud eventually, and I needed it ready. I stared at the file for a long time before I whispered, time to end this. Then my phone lit up. Sterling calling. His name pulsed on the screen like a wound trying to reopen itself. The screen dimmed just as I placed my phone down, Sterling's name still glowing faintly on the glass. I didn't answer. Not yet. By morning, I was in a blazer I hadn't touched since the last investor summit. It still smelled like hotel bar scotch and dry clean desperation. The subway ride into Manhattan was silent, not because it was empty, but because I was. Focus made me that way. Rain streaked the windows, echoing last night's thunder like it was warning me one last time. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes, I was. I walked into the building through the revolving doors like I used to 100 times before. Except this time, no badge, no ID, just a signed NDA and a board summons. The receptionist glanced up, confused for a second, then flicked her eyes back down. Maybe she already knew. Maybe they all did. The boardroom was just as I remembered. Polished glass, synthetic calm, but something was off. Too many seats filled, too many eyes waiting. Sterling sat at the head, flanked by his lawyer on one side and HR on the other. He looked me straight in the face as I entered, but his smile never reached his eyes. "Mr. Monroe," the lawyer began, clearing his throat like this was a polite misunderstanding. "We'd like to address a serious matter regarding proprietary documents. Specifically, the $9.5 million data migration initiative and your unauthorized access to sensitive systems." I pulled out the chair at the far end of the table. Didn't even sit, just rested my hands on the backrest and waited. HR jumped in. She always had a knack for bad timing. "If these allegations are true, Arden, we'd have to move forward with industry sanctions. You could be blacklisted." Sterling finally spoke. His voice was carefully measured, but the undertone was acid. "Frankly, I'm disappointed. We trusted you. And now we've got offshore funds redirected and no access to our proprietary frameworks." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a document with my name on it, a transfer request, signature forged, timestamps manipulated. My stomach didn't even flinch. I'd expected this. I kept my gaze on him, quiet. It made him sweat more than if I'd screamed. Then slowly, I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a thumb drive, and plugged it into the sleek silver conference system on the wall. "No counter-argument?" Sterling asked smugly. I tilted my head. "Just context." And I pressed play. His voice filled the room. "Inflate it, make it look like back-end dev needed more hands. They won't dig past the numbers. And if they do, I've got Arden on it. He never questions anything." A pause. Then laughter. Another voice. Blake, one of the VPs. "Brilliant. You should be running the SEC." More laughter. Then Sterling again. "Worst case, we blame Arden. He's disposable. Always has been." The room turned to stone. No one moved. No one breathed. Sterling's jaw locked, but the color drained from his face like someone had pulled the plug on his blood supply. "I told you to choose," I said evenly, letting the words settle. "I chose truth. Now they see who you really are." His voice cracked. "That could be edited. Spliced. You don't know, I cut him off. "Discovery works both ways. You want to try me in court? Let's open the books. Every fake invoice. Every investor call you manipulated." A board member stood. "Is this true, Sterling?" Sterling's eyes darted from face to face, looking for a lifeline. There was none. Then, with a sharp shove, he launched up from his chair, pointing straight at me, veins bulging. "You think this ends here? You think you've won?" Two security guards pushed through the doors, alerted by someone outside, probably the silent assistant who'd recorded that voicemail in the first place. Sterling roared, voice unhinged, face red and trembling. "You'll regret this. You ungrateful, arrogant—" They grabbed his arms before he could get closer. His feet dragged against the carpet as they pulled him away. His threats echoed even after the doors slammed shut. Silence returned, but not the kind that binds. This one broke chains. I looked around at the stunned faces. Then calmly, I disconnected the thumb drive, slipped it back into my coat pocket, and walked out without another word. Down the hall, my phone buzzed again. Not a call this time, a text. Unknown number. Check your email. You'll want to see this. Sterling's roar had barely faded when the boardroom fell into a stunned, uneasy quiet. His voice might have left the room, but the stench of what he built and what he tried to bury still lingered like a gas leak no one wanted to be the first to acknowledge. I stayed standing. My chair remained untouched. Part of me didn't want to sit because I knew if I did, the weight of everything might finally catch up, and I wasn't ready. Not yet. One of the senior board members, a man whose name I'd only heard whispered during budget approvals, finally broke the silence. "You did the right thing," he said without looking at me. More to the table than to me, like he was trying to make peace with a decision he should have made himself years ago. I gave a single nod, no gratitude, no pride, just acknowledgement, because this wasn't triumph. It was cleanup after a wreck, the kind you walk away from because you have to, not because you win. HR avoided my eyes. Legal said nothing. Someone quietly collected the playback device from the table, as if afraid even touching it might burn. I didn't wait for more conversation. I gathered my coat, nodded once more to the room, and stepped into the elevator. By the time I reached the street, it had started drizzling again. Manhattan in early spring, gray skies, fast walkers, and a million unread expressions. I blended in like I used to, like I wanted to. But everything inside me was different. The subway home was half full, but I barely noticed. I kept seeing the flash of Sterling's face when the audio played. That exact moment when his confidence cracked, when power reversed. He didn't believe anyone would ever hold him accountable. And maybe, before he was right. I unlocked my apartment just after dusk. No fanfare, no texts, no one waiting on the other side. But the silence. This time, it didn't feel like a punishment. I placed my keys in the bowl by the door, shrugged off the blazer, poured myself half a glass of water and left it untouched on the counter. My body moved on autopilot. I drifted toward the room I hadn't entered in weeks, the one with the pale yellow walls and the tiny shelf that still held a folded baby blanket no one ever used. The nursery, the place I painted one Saturday morning while she made lists of names we never got to call out loud. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have. Then I stepped inside. The crib was still there, not a speck of dust on it. Not because I cleaned, but because I couldn't bring myself to disturb it. Like moving anything would mean accepting the absence as permanent. I lowered myself to the floor and leaned against the side. And for the first time in this entire process, the threats, the recordings, the meetings, the betrayal, I allowed myself to feel the weight of it all. The grief, the loss, the rage that had once burned like wildfire, but had now settled into something colder, sharper. There was a small picture frame on the shelf. I hadn't touched it in months. I picked it up gently. The ultrasound photo, the one Sterling had scoffed at when I'd asked for time off. "Everyone has problems, Arden. We all carry something." "No, not like this. Not when your something never even got to take a breath." I held the frame tighter and whispered into the room that wasn't hers, but should have been. I kept my promise. No more silence. No more swallowing pain just to survive. No more pretending the cost of their power games was just another business line item. No more waiting for someone else to do what only I could. I sat there for a long while, long enough for the apartment lights to dim around me. Then I rose, gently placing the frame back where it belonged. I walked into the living room and opened my laptop. The fan hummed softly as the screen flickered on. A few unread emails waited. One was from a state regulator. One was from a lawyer I hadn't hired yet but knew I'd need. I attached the files, the recordings, the emails, the doctored documents and the originals, everything. I hit send. The cursor blinked a few times, then stilled. I closed the lid slowly and stood once more in the doorway of the nursery. There wasn't peace yet. I knew that. Healing doesn't come packaged with justice. But something had shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hoping someone else would make it right. "They'll never see me as the son they wanted," I said quietly, almost to myself. But I finally see myself as the man I needed to be. A soft breeze from the open window stirred the curtain. I reached for the light switch, and as the room fell into darkness, for the first time in years, I felt light inside me,